Episode 11, Thunder Pattern on Bronze.
More than 8,000 years ago, on the ancient land of China in the east, in the deep universe, nebulae surged like boiling blood, the vault of heaven cracked, and the abyss of black mud dripped. Amidst the despair of all things returning to zero, the ancient echo of goddess Nuwa radiated high-dimensional divine light, holding the five-colored stones that gathered the universe's primal emotions and soared upward. The five-colored stones represented pure love and pain, turning into a gorgeous stream of light the moment they touched the crack. Wherever the light reached, the abyss was perfectly mended. Nuwa scattered the sparks of creation to the mortal realm, and this sky was originally firmly protected, leaving behind warm traces. After long ages, time flowed into a highly automated future. The visual temperature dropped sharply, and humans were alienated into cold parts on a massive production line. Deprived of a connection with art for a long time, the numb collective subconscious of humanity gathered in the dark, eventually generating an absolute rational force called Zero Domain. Giant grayish-white geometric cracks spread like lightning, ruthlessly destroying the cosmic space-time of art. The sky that had once been mended collapsed again, and countless precious essences of art shattered, scattering to all corners of the river of time. In a cold and lifeless dark corner of the city, a high-dimensional light glowed, and Iona emerged with the compassionate echo of goddess Nuwa. Her silver hair fluttered gently, and her hands softly cradled a glowing, translucent tesseract, the space-time blocks designed to collect shattered space-time. Looking up at the ruined spiritual universe, her eyes empty and sorrowful, she lamented the destruction brought by oblivion. Only by retrieving the scattered fragments of art and life's touching moments can we piece together the lost truth, goodness, and beauty. Grayish-white data covered the future streets of Taipei, and Taipei 101 in the rain was lost in the cold neon light. As the most ordinary cog on the assembly line of the city, the youth Li Yu had empty eyes. Iona passed the space-time blocks into his hands. At the moment of touch, the warmth of ancient art flooded his heart, bringing back the long-lost sense of pain and the reality of life. This time, we must mend the sky ourselves. Liu gripped the blocks tightly, about to embark on a mending journey to collect the lost truth, goodness, and beauty.
A Zhongyuan Purdue is being held at the entrance of the temple in downtown Taipei. 3 animals and 5 fruits are arranged on the table, and the incense burners are filled with incense sticks. But the whole street is as quiet as a cemetery. The citizens have empty expressions and walk mechanically. They insert the incense into the burner, hold their hands together for exactly 3 seconds, and then turn around and leave, without praying to the gods or making wishes. What the old woman recited was not a scripture, but a standard prayer automatically pushed by the voice assistant. The procedure has been completed. It is recommended to return to work. She put down the rice and turned around to leave. Her back disappeared into the crowd of machines without looking back at the bowl of rice. Liu stood in the corner and looked at the bowl of white rice. He tried to recall the feeling of numbness in his palms when he prayed devoutly, but found that the memory had been accurately stripped away. Human beings are losing this sense of ritual. Although the ritual is there, the soul behind it has been drained. The worship has become a preservation program, and the wedding has become a data exchange. Liu clenched his hands and felt uneasy in his heart. At this moment, the space-time building blocks in his backpack emitted extremely heavy gray frequency vibrations, like a copper hammer hitting a rib. A thick layer of green rust appeared on the surface of the building blocks. The patina oxide layer with 3,000 years of age was rough and mottled. The inner blocks showed a dark red molten light that flowed slowly like high-temperature copper liquid. Iona's voice sounded like the aftertaste of an ancient bell. Did you hear it? Humans 3,000 years ago used this voice to talk to the heaven and earth. Her shadow condensed in the white mist. Her silver hair was tied into a witchcraft high bun. Her forehead was embedded with a Taotai pattern, and bronze fragments were spinning around her, making a metallic trembling sound. Go there and find the bronze caster, before he completely forgets why he was cast and the temperature of his soul. Iona sighed. The building blocks immediately erupted into waves of bronze rust-colored dark gold light, turning into high-speed rotating molten copper liquid and metal particles, engulfing Liu's figure and forcibly pulling him into the extremely hot cracks in time and space. Liu landed on the wasteland enveloped by the heat wave. In front of him was a semi-underground workshop made of loess. Dozens of dome furnaces extinguished their fires, emitting black smoke. The outer walls of the clay furnaces were burned by repeated high temperatures, creating fiery red cracks that pulsed like blood vessels. The surface of the wasteland workshop is littered with discarded pottery mold fragments. The originally exquisite Taotai patterns and Koalong patterns have now been smoothed and erased by Zero Domain, turning into a cold, textureless gray plane. The marks carved by the craftsman and the warmth of the fingertips have disappeared. The cold, inorganic voice of the Zero Realm seeped out from the furnace. Sacrifice is a cognitive defect. It is recommended that all sacrificial vessels be recast into functional tools. The black geometric grid spread from the cracks, quickly eroding and formatting the remaining patterns. Deep in the workshop are placed tools and raw materials semi-formatted by Zero Domain. Blister copper or dried tin powder, broken wisdom bamboo carving knife, and a completely blank pottery model, like a cold face with facial features dug out. Liu picked up the time and space blocks and put them close to the blank ceramic model. The blocks unfolded into a mandala structure, projecting the blank grooves of the unfinished tripod wall. Liu touched the smooth clay with his fingertips, feeling the last traces left by the craftsman thousands of years ago. He closed his eyes and placed his palms on the rough pottery model. The bricks resonated synchronously with his heartbeat. Under the smooth remnants, there was a weak vibration. Liu opened his eyes. These lines are the sounds of thunder carved into the metal with their hands. He picked up the broken bamboo knife and carved the first thunder pattern. A weak body temperature residue was transmitted from the tip of the knife. At the moment when the first thunder pattern was formed, a long metal sound came from the depths of the workshop, and a huge door decorated with bronze sheets and engraved with gluttonous patterns slowly opened. Hot air waves of burning copper liquid and animal bones spewed out from behind the door. Liu gripped the bamboo carving knife and stepped into the endless darkness behind the door, entering the extremely huge underground sacrificial site. The crystals on the cave wall reflected the dark red firelight in the giant furnace. The underground furnace is surrounded by 8 celestial pottery models. The dome is extremely high, and the crystalline rock walls reflect the dark red firelight. Bronze fragments floating in the air collide and make a brief trembling sound, like the exhausted breath of an ancient forger waiting alone by the fire on a winter night. Liu walks towards a figure standing in front of the giant furnace, the thunder pattern priest. At this time, his hands were deeply embedded in the hot animal blood mud, focusing on shaping the face of the Taotai beast. The firelight expanded like a tide as the copper liquid surged, casting a deformed and huge shadow on the mottled rock wall. Liu stepped forward and asked, "What are you doing?" The priest did not raise his head and moved his hands extremely slowly in the sticky mud, shaping Taoye's wide eyes, and answered with a buzzing metallic voice, "I am talking." Liu felt a suffocating loneliness in the air. The priest's nails fell off and his fingertips were cracked, silently enduring the heat and extreme concentration in a deserted underground cave. "Talk to the sky?" Liu asked. The priest picked up a broken bronze fragment beside him and tapped it. The low and long frequency penetrated the barrier of 3,000 years and resonated deep in Liu's chest, making his teeth rattle and tears instantly welling up in his eyes. The heavy vibration conveyed the original impulse. "I am here. I exist. God, did you hear it?" The priest looked at the tears and said, "My people are illiterate, but they need to tell the world that they have lived in this world." The priest continued to mold his gluttonous eyes, and his voice was dry and hoarse. "Copper is very heavy, and melting requires the entire tribe, men, women, and children, to take turns fanning, adding charcoal, and keeping vigil for 7 days and 7 nights. Everyone kneels in front of the furnace, because the casting process itself is a sacrifice, and it is the only way they can talk to the gods of heaven and earth." A tear mixed with copper powder fell from the corner of the old man's eye. At this time, the voice of the Zero Domain oozed out, saying that the electromagnetic wave transmission efficiency is billions of times higher. It is recommended to extinguish all furnaces immediately to save unnecessary energy consumption. Gray geometric cracks spread on the rock wall, eroding the Tao fan and the huge furnace. The priest groaned in pain, and the thunder patterns faded and turned gray. He shouted, "You don't understand. Efficiency is not the point. The point is that there are people who are willing to burn themselves for 7 days and 7 nights for one thing. That fatigue and sweat are the language that the gods can hear." The closed sadness and numbness in Liu's heart were completely shattered by the resonance. His eyes awakened, his pupils flowed, and he shed real tears. Rush forward without hesitation. He did not resist the geometric grid, but inserted the broken bamboo carving knife into his waist and put his hands directly into the hot animal blood mud. The burning pain was like 1,000 red-hot steel needles piercing into his palms and fingers. He gritted his teeth and groped in the mud with his hands to find the outline of the right eye decorated with the gluttonous animal mask. The moment his fingertips pressed in, 3,000 years of memories poured into his fingertips like a torrent. The indentations left by countless casters' blackened fingers on the pottery model, they are the only proof of their fears and beliefs. Li Yu's fingers moved quickly in the clay, carving out the round pupil of Tao Ye's right eye, the forked thunder pattern on his forehead, and the Kuei dragon pattern. The thunder pattern on the priest's body then returned to a dark golden luster. When the last thick thunder pattern was carved into the pottery model, all the bronze fragments were struck at the same moment, and the overlapping frequency emitted the most primitive metal chorus. The zero-domain grid was shattered by the loud noise, and the priest's body erupted with a luminous dark golden light. He looked at Li Yu's hands covered with copper mud and said, "You finally understand." The priest closed his eyes, and the thunder veins on his body peeled off, turning into heavy and weighty metal light fragments that flowed into the space-time building blocks, emitting a long and low metal sound. Then the entire bronze civilization time and space was repaired. The furnace rekindled the real blazing flames, and the cloud and thunder patterns on the pottery model grew by themselves from the depths of the clay. The grooves were filled with the traces of body temperature and pressure left by the craftsman's fingertips. The smell of metal smelting and the wheezing sound of pulling the bellows returned to the air. The old man's body completed its final condensation in the warm light, turning into rough and irregular bronze metal light fragments with a handmade texture that flowed into the building blocks. The digital polarization on the surface of the building blocks all faded away, replaced by a layer of gentle, canvas-textured shimmer. The entire Shang and Zhou bronze time and space began to change. The restoration was quiet and slow, with heartbreaking tenderness. The building was fixed on the slightly skewed wooden building. The thunder and thundercloud patterns on the pottery model grew by themselves from the depths of the clay, and the grooves were filled with traces of body temperature and pressure left by the craftsman's fingertips. Steady white noise was replaced by a simple etude melody, played on an out-of-tune piano. The city acquired flaws, the pixel edges were no longer aligned, and the light appeared soft shadows. It was no longer a sterile utopia, but a place with breathing and memory. Li Yu saw a vague notch on the tree trunk. The building blocks lit up in gold for successful recycling. Li Yu returned to the streets of Taipei, and golden fonts appeared on the outer wall of 101. The reason why the Shang and Zhou bronze art exists is not to leave behind skills, but to let future generations know there were people who lived so truly. Li Yu took off the wearable device, and the chaotic and real city smells came out. The smell of pudu incense at the entrance of the temple, the smell of motorcycle gasoline, and the smell of wet earth after the rain. These smells are extremely real. The wind blowing, the heartbeat, and the tiny bumps of the footsteps on the sidewalk are completely his own feelings. Li Yu opened his eyes, his face trembling slightly. He saw the steam above the bowl of white rice rising slowly, forming a curve that looked like a thunder pattern. Suddenly, the space-time blocks in his palm shook violently. The golden light was replaced by the green rusty luster of heavy bronze, and the blocks sharply reorganized. The building blocks project a string of indecipherable ancient text fragments, presenting a mixture of oracle bone inscriptions and bronze inscriptions. The projection flashes with the fiery red and copper green polarized light of molten iron, exuding the smell of sacrificial incense. A gluttonous totem appears vaguely in the corner, eyes wide open like bronze mirrors. The projection is extinguished in the noise, and the picture fades into total blackness, accompanied by the heavy tones of bronze chimes. Art fragments, the poetry of geometry in the desert.